You ready to get started? I know I am. This is going to be really, really fun. But before you get started with actually crocheting your solar system blanket, I wanted to make a couple of videos to show you kind of some tips and techniques that I've used in making this blanket that have made the whole process a lot easier and a lot neater. It's kind of been a learning curve. You can probably tell from looking at my pictures of my solar system blanket that as I was starting, my color changes weren't too sharp. My joined rounds weren't too sharp, but that's okay. The brilliant thing is if you don't like it, you can either, frog it, take it back a few rows and redo it, or you can always sew a planet on it later. It's going to be totally fine. In this video, we're going to go ahead and talk about continuous rounds versus joined rounds, and we're also going to show you how to do the magic circle, which is kind of key for getting started for this blanket. Now, I should mention that most of the rounds in this blanket are going to be using what I'm calling the continuous spiral method. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and make a circle, and I'm going to show you in this video. But basically, you're just going to work in a continuous spiral all the way around the blanket as you go, instead of joining at the end of every round. Video number 2 in this kind of getting started series for this project will go into more detail about working the joined rounds and why you need to do that. It's mostly important for color change purposes. But for the bulk of your blanket, it's perfectly fine to work in continuous rounds. The reason why I've worked most of this blanket in continuous rounds is because when you do a joined round, you can end up with a seam. And if you've made some crocheted hats, you might have seen where you can see like a visible seam running down the side of them or running down the back every time you've joined to the beginning of that round. And I didn't really want that with this blanket. I wanted you to be able to just, keep going, not have to worry about that, and not have a seam at the end that's kind of unsightly, okay? So that's why I decided to do continuous rounds versus joined rounds. But the number one most important thing to remember when you're working with this continuous spiral method is to remember to use your stitch marker, okay? You're going to want to place a stitch marker at the beginning of every single round, and it's going to go in the very first stitch of every single round. And you're going to move it up every time you complete a round. Now, I've got a couple different colors of stitch markers around here. I've got this blue one, I've got some purple ones, I've got some green ones for later. But what I'm going to recommend is that you have one kind of unique colored stitch marker, and that's going to be the one that will indicate for you the very first stitch of your round. The fact that it's a different color than the other ones I'm going to be using is a really good visual indicator for me. I know I'm a visual person. I'm not sure about you guys, but it's a really good, heads up, hey, the end of the round's coming up. Pay attention to your pattern. So I recommend using this in a different color. If you have a different style of stitch marker that's different, that would work just fine too. It's entirely up to you. But I do like the different colored ones. These are little cheap ones I got on Amazon. You can find them at Michael's and Joann's and all over the place. Really cool. They came in a little case with lots of colors. So these are pretty important for this blanket. If you don't have some, you can use other things as stitch markers, but I think these are pretty good. Okay. Now I'll get into the other stitch markers a little bit later, but I'm going to go ahead and show you first how to do the magic circle. Okay? There are lots of tutorials out there on how to do the magic circle. This is the way that I've been doing this for years now, and it's always worked really well for me. But what I'm going to do is leave kind of a long-ish tail, because I'm going to need to weave that in later. I'm just going to put my tail end off to the side. I'm going to fold my working end of the yarn over, let's see here, over the front, okay? So just literally I got my tail in the back here, take this working end and fold it over just like that. Almost makes a little goldfish shape, right? So then the next step would be to take the working end of the yarn, which is right here. This is my tail, working end. And take the working end of my yarn, and I'm just going to go ahead and fold it under with my index finger. Fold it under the loop that we've made, that circle that we've made, so that it kind of comes across like this, right? I'm not putting it through, I'm not putting it off to the side, I'm just kind of putting it across. And I'm doing that so that we can catch it with our crochet hook here. Okay, I'll do that again for you so you can see. I'm going to shorten up this tail so it's a little bit easier to show you in the video. But you want to leave that tail kind of long. Okay, so tail end, working end. Fold the working end over the tail end, like that. I'm going to take the working end again, kind of fold it underneath the circle, just like that. I'm going to take my crochet hook in this next step. I'm going to insert it underneath that working end of the yarn that we folded underneath the circle, so that it kind of goes through like that, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of reposition. I'm going to pinch these two pieces of yarn here together. I'm going to grab this here with my index finger. You can see we've got our tail end there. We've got what looks like the start of a knot on that end, right? But there's your magic circle, okay? All we do at this point is we chain, in this case we're going to chain 2. Just chain 2. Now we just need to crochet some half double crochets inside this circle, okay? So I'm just going to yarn over and work some half double crochets inside the circle. You can see I'm literally taking my hook, putting it through the circle. You'll note that those 2 strands of yarn are on the top part of the hook. And I just pull the yarn around them as I go, just like that. Okay, whoops, alrighty. And you just kind of do that as many times as indicated in the pattern. This one says to do it 6 times. You would just do that as indicated, and you're just literally crocheting around the outer edge of this circle. Okay, and then when you're all done and you're ready to close it up, you just take your tail end and you give it a good firm tug, and that cinches that shut, right? Just like that. Okay. Now at this point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't have enough stitches in there. I didn't put enough in there. That's okay. Just force one more in there. Just like that. Now at this point, I'm ready to go ahead and start round 2. Okay. Now you can see here's round 1. Right there, round 1. I would put my blue stitch marker in there to mark that that's round 1. But I'm going to wait just a little bit because I know that it's round 1. I know round 1 has 6 stitches in it. So I'm going to go ahead and do round 2. And instead of joining here, right, I'm not going to join with a slip stitch. All I'm going to do is just keep working half double crochet stitches around, okay? So I'm just going to insert my hook there. I'm going to do half double crochet increase. Oops, right? So we're doing 2 half double crochets in the same space. There we go. So we need to do 6 half double crochet increases. So that was 1. This is 2. This is 3. This is 4. This is 5, and this is 6. Okay, and there's round 2, right? Just like that. Now start round 3 by doing another increase, right? So you're just going to keep working in that continuous spiral, and you're going to do a half double crochet increase right here. Okay. At this point, I will go ahead and take my blue stitch marker. I'm going to count back 2 because we did 2 half double crochets for that increase. I'm going to count back 1 and 2. I'm going to insert this into the second stitch away, right? So there's 1 and 2. This is the first stitch of my round. I'm just going to go ahead and close that up. And we can see that now that's on there and we're good to go. Round 3 here says to do a half double crochet increase, which we've done, and then we're going to half double crochet in the next stitch, just like that. And you're going to keep doing that all the way around. So increase and then half double crochet, increase, half double crochet, etc. I'm going to go ahead and work my next increase here. But what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch marker at this increase. So you can see here's my increase, my 2 stitches right there. There's the first one, there's the second one, or I guess this is the first one and this is the second one. We're working that way. So here's 1, here's 2. What I'm going to do is take a stitch color or stitch marker in a second color, and I'm going to go ahead and insert that into the first stitch of that increase. Just like that. So here's the first increase, here's the second, or the first stitch of the increase, here's the second stitch of the increase, okay? And the reason why I'm going to do that will become evident in video number 3 of this series. It's about stitch markers. But I'm doing it so that I can kind of keep track of where my increases are in the round. When you're just getting started, it's, you know, a tight space, so it's going to be a lot of stitch markers in a small space, and you don't necessarily need them for the first several rounds. I would probably recommend doing this round 4 or 5, whenever you start to kind of lose track a little bit. It'll help you keep track a little bit of where those increases are. Okay. So I did the increase. I'm going to do a half double crochet in the next stitch. And then next up is another increase. And again, I'm going to take stitch marker and insert that into the first stitch of that increase. And we're going to do a half double crochet. And then another increase. Like so. Another stitch marker right there, and then half double crochet, and then another increase, there we go, and another half double crochet, and then another increase. I think my count might be off a smidge. That's okay. Increase and then put another stitch marker in. There we go. And I'm just going to go ahead and fib it here. Do the single or the half double crochet there. I apologize, my yarn's being eaten by my bowl back here. Just take it out. Okay. So now we're at the beginning here. This is round 3. We should have 18 stitches. I'm just going to count them real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Okay. So now what you can do, I have one too many of those. All right. What you can do is you can take your other purple stitch marker here. We did this increase way at the beginning, remember? And I'm going to go ahead and just insert this purple stitch marker into this first stitch of the round here with this blue one. This blue one indicates the very first stitch of the round. The purple ones indicate where our increases are. In this case, it's in the same stitch, right? So at this point, you got a lot of stitch markers, again, in a small space. It's going to be a little finicky when you first start. But when you get to like round 80, these are going to be a lot more spread out, and there's going to be a lot of space, and they're going to be really useful for you. Again, just remember every time you do a round, you're working in continuous spirals unless otherwise indicated in the pattern, and we'll go into that in video number 2 of this Getting Started series. But just go ahead and move this stitch marker. In my case, it's blue. In my photos, it's my little K9 stitch marker from Doctor Who. So it just kind of, whatever color or type of stitch marker you're going to use to mark the beginning of your round, just remember to keep moving that up every round. Okay? So that's kind of our introduction to the magic circle, continuous rounds, stitch markers, joined rounds, a little bit of everything in this video. Video 2 again is going to go into more detail on joined rounds, why they're important, and how to do the color changes that go with those.